Tell me about the logo again.
Oh, the logo, I made it in SolidWorks because that's the only like remotely close to photo editing software I've got. But it's nominally a door with the H, and then those two little bars on it to represent like a home. And then I've got the bubble around it to kind of encapsulate the enclosed habitat that I'm trying to represent here. And so that was the logic behind how I made the logo itself.
Very cool. I like it. All right, great. So I'm going to get into it now. Welcome to the Crawl Space Podcast, where we peek under the hood of life in the real estate industry. My name is Joshua Wynn Gibson, and I'm your host. I'm an experienced real estate professional here in Los Angeles, California. I'm a licensed agent, and alongside with my wife, Naomi, we run Gibson House. One of the core components of our business is we buy distressed properties and spend, on average, about 6 months renovating them, and then we sell them. We've been doing this in LA since 2018. Thank you very much for joining us, and let's hop into this week's episode. All right, I'm here with Krieger. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
How'd you like that intro?
That was great.
Super pro, right?
Yeah.
all
Sounds
right.
like the other ones.
That's right. I do it on every episode. So why don't let's just jump right into it. What is Habitat?
Habitat is empowering people to live on their own terms, wherever they want, and with whatever kind of lifestyle that they want. Nominally, it's a system that is a factory-built utility service that provides water, power, and wastewater services in an enclosure that can be shipped to the site and hooked up to either an existing home or built into new construction or a prefab home.
Wow. That's really interesting. I love it. That's why we've got you on the show, because obviously it's connected to real estate. It's connected to building homes. But this is a step further. You're taking us off the grid, and I'm
Not
interested.
necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. So
It
how
can
so?
still be connected to the grid.
Well, that's
It's
actually
not explicitly
Sure.
going off the grid. It's providing the option to go off the grid or allowing people to gain that ability to buffer themselves from the grid volatility that we're seeing more and more with all these natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding, whatever.
amazing. I mean, you jumped ahead for me, which is great, because that was something I was interested in. So let's just say I'm a homeowner here in Los Angeles and I buy Habitat. I buy a unit. I install it in my house. Do I have to get off of the grid, or how does that work?
No.
No?
No, this is allowing you to either go off the grid if you so choose, or you can basically provide a way to have an alternative if grid services go down. And I think what people are seeing across the country is that the grid, both electrical and water infrastructure and also wastewater infrastructure, sewers, are not as infallible as people thought they used to be. And so we're really seeing a big move in that direction, and I'm providing a solution for those customers that really want to take control and put that in their own hands.
Excuse me. So how long ago did you come up with this, the business? When did it start? Or when's the concept? When did it happen?
The concept I've been mulling around in my head for years. I'm an engineer by training. I've worked in the renewable energy industry for pretty much my entire 15-year career. I spent a few years working in building systems, doing HVAC and energy efficiency and stuff like that. So not only do I have experience in the renewable space, but I also have a pretty good understanding of what happens in a building and how to really deal with air and heating and ventilation and all of that good stuff. So it's been a culmination of my career thus far, and really is inspired by my interest in sustainable living and having the ability to go wherever you want and plop down and really establish a home where you feel you're called.
That's great. I mean, so what about the name? When has the name been around for as long as you've been kicking the idea around, or is it?
Oh no, the name was a brainstorm with a buddy of mine that we came up with probably, I don't know, 9 months ago.
It's good, really good.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think it describes what I'm doing. It's maybe not like, I've talked to some lawyer friends who are more versed in, say, copyright law, and they're like, oh, well, if you want to really copyright something, then it has to be unique, and it has to be in some way differentiated from other things. There are plenty of, like, there's Habitat for Humanity, and there's other habitat something or others. So this isn't necessarily distinguishable from that in any particular sense. But, copyright isn't the most important element to what I'm doing here.
Right.
It's the technology and empowering people to be able to live where they want on their own terms.
So, I mean, that being said, we've already touched a little bit, but what makes you the guy to do this for us? So what's your background? Give me a little bit more about where you came from and how you got to where you are with Habitat right now.
Sure. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I've been working for about 15 years, mostly in the solar industry, but I've got experience in battery technology and CSP, and which is concentrating solar power, totally different side of things, and thermal engineering and home systems and sort of you name it across the board, kind of anything related to home electricity and utility services. I've touched it in some way.
Was that was that intentional after graduating with your degree? Was it something that you found, or was it something that you were interested in right away?
I knew I was interested in energy. I remember my thermodynamics class in sophomore year of college. There was a slide up on the screen in class, and they were describing all of the world's ailments. It was the top 10 list of things that are wrong with society. And I think the top 3 were like energy, water, and food. And below each one, if you had unlimited amounts of the one above, then you could solve the ones below it. And energy is the one at the top. So I was like, all right, so don't bother with water, don't bother with food, just figure out how to make energy in a sustainable way. And so that really drew me towards the energy industry as a pursuit for my career. And then I was able to get a job at a solar developer in Colorado right out of college, and worked there for several years. And then I started my first company in energy storage with some college buddies. And that was a really eye-opening experience. It fell through, as most startups do, but it was a great experience, and it was really fun. And that really galvanized me towards wanting to pursue startups as sort of a career path. So I've pretty much exclusively worked at startups my whole career, which is a little bit of a grind. They work you to the bone. But the reward is there if you can realize it, and it's fun too. Building a team, getting to really know the industry you're in, and getting that thrill of succeeding when you do, because it feels like the whole world's against you to a great extent, because you're such a small fish in a huge pond. And you're competing against ultimately companies like Exxon and BP and some of these other behemoths in the energy industry that just drown out everything else. But it's been a really interesting time also to be a part of it, because that shift has started to happen too. When I started, solar was minuscule in terms of its impact back in 2008, and now it's a force to be reckoned with, and it's not going anywhere.
So you have solar at your house right now.
Sure. Yeah.
And you told me about, I want you to break down how you use solar with your Powerwall. You mentioned it to me briefly, but can you tell me again in a nice, concise, digestible?
I'll do my best. I'll limit the amount of jargon I use. Okay, so distributed generation assets like a solar array or a tiny little wind farm or something that you can put on top of your house generate electricity locally. And then if you don't have any way to store that energy, it just goes and gets pushed to the grid. And then you do something called net metering, which basically allows the utility to log how much electricity you produce and compare that to how much you use. And then however much, what the net is what you pay for. If you have a battery, which we do, you can then adjust how that electricity is fed back to the grid. And the electricity can be charged onto the battery at specific times, and then the battery can discharge at other times. That's important because the battery isn't necessarily generating anything. It's just storing electricity. But what it does allow you to do is discharge more electricity when it's more valuable. And that comes into play if you use time of use electricity pricing. And if you're an LADWP customer, they have 3 different pricing bands. One is your base load, which I think is from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. or something like that. And then you have your shoulder or off peak, which is from 8 to something. I don't remember the exact times, but it's maybe 2 or 3 hours on either end. And then you have your peak, which is during the midday. And depending on the time of the year, those price differentials can be as much as 30 or 50% between base and peak load. And so by using the battery to its full extent, you can charge up during base power times and then dissipate all that energy or however much you want during peak hours. And that does a lot more to offset your electrical usage. So we're kind of getting an amplified effect with our generation profile because the solar generation peaks happen to coincide with the peak power times pretty closely. And then your battery's just reinforcing that. So we're able to pay pretty much nothing for our electricity just with those 2 systems working in concert.
So every month, basically zero.
Pretty close to it.
Cool.
It varies, and it's harder now that we have an EV.
Yeah.
So we're charging a lot more, but we make sure to charge at night, and we know the times. We know don't plug it in until after 8, and then on weekends it's all baseload power because it's pretty much dictated by AC usage,
right?
And in office buildings, and maybe that'll change with the current trends of people going out of offices,
right?
But it's still pretty much driven by building usage, and AC is the largest factor there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. When you told me that, I was like, okay, this is awesome. And I'm sure, when you were building your system, you kind of have a little, sandbox at your house that you're playing with, which is fun. You have some power that you're generating from the sun. You have these batteries, and you're distributing it back to the grid. You're using it for yourself. So you got a little.
Well, and we've got the rain barrels.
Oh yeah,
and we've got a gray water system.
That's right.
So I'm playing around with all the different things that I want to build into the habitat enclosure.
I mean, are those components you've got at your home right now? I mean, how are they working so far? Like, how's the rain barrel water, the system working at your house? Do you like it?
I mean, I love it.
No.
It's great in terms of water savings. Water's so cheap on a municipal level that I don't think that particular installation will ever make financial sense.
Right.
But the gray water system will eventually pay back in terms of how much it's saving us. Where we haven't turned on our backyard irrigation since December or something.
Walk me through
like
gray
that.
water. What is that?
So gray water is anything not from a toilet. In LA, they also rope in the sink in your kitchen because that has enough biocontaminants from food and other things that they really don't want that going in your yard. But anything else, you can do sinks, laundry, and showers, bathtubs.
That was a company in LA, right? That did yours. What are they called? Who are they called?
They are the Gray Water Corps.
Gray Water Corps, right?
Yeah.
I saw a little sign.
They're over in Nela somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I've seen them around the neighborhood because when I was living in Glassell Park, I think one of the guys lives over there, but I always saw those trucks on my street. So it's like a van with a nice logo.
Yeah, they do a good job.
It's cool.
We like them.
So shifting gears now to the actual system itself, I'm going to pull up, maybe I'll have to flash this on the, flash it up on the screen when we, Kai here, let's pull up your email and check out. I want to know what's in the system itself. So can you walk me through some of the, components that are physically in the unit? I'm looking at it right now. I see some barrels. I see some pipes. I see what you point out as batteries. Walk me through what's going on inside of this.
So there's three basic components. What I refer to as chassis in the system. There's an electrical chassis that contains a modular battery system that you can tailor to whatever size you want. And I think that can hold anywhere from 1 to 15 batteries. And at least the way it's currently configured. And then there's a wastewater treatment chassis that deals with the shit water and basically treats it and expels it out of the system. I know some people, the ick factor is a big thing, so I just don't really want to go down that road and fight that fight because Southern California lost that battle about 10 years ago. They tried to do full wastewater recycling, and there was the whole toilet to tap campaign that really quashed that. So
to clarify then, you're saying you don't want to fight the battle as in like your system doesn't reuse it for
correct
water that we might shower or drink or anything.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just like, forget about it. I'm not going to bother.
It's not that much water.
People don't
comparatively, and it's just not worth.
Right.
Yeah.
Even bothering.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though technically you can bring it back to potable quality water.
Right.
Like they do it on the space station.
Right.
They do it in other regions. They do it on a municipal level in Orange County. It's not technically difficult. It's just it makes people queasy.
Right. So what happens to that water then? Actually,
that water gets expelled and waters plants.
Got it. Cool.
Or you just drain it. It's not much.
Just drain it.
And then you've got a water recycling and storage system, or a chassis that has water tanks, which is basically your water battery, as an analogy.
Cool.
And then you've got a series of filters that take out any of the biocontaminants, starting with some fairly coarse filtration, and then moving up in their filtration capabilities and reduced pore size, so that you get all the way down to kind of almost the molecular level. And then the final stage is a sanitization step with a UV light. So you've got basically the same quality filtration that you'd get on a municipal level, baked into this small modular system.
Mm-hmm. And then how big is this system as a whole?
So the sort of benchmark design that I've got is the size of a 20-foot shipping container, a little smaller, but that's roughly what you're looking at, and that could be built into, say, a garage, or be placed in someone's backyard, or in the case of a new construction, you could put it under the house, and spread it out in the crawl space or something like that.
Yeah, and we need to access it, right? We'd have to.
There's some parts of it that have to be accessed,
right.
but the rest of it is fairly simple in terms of standard plumbing fixtures and other things like that. So it's not anything you couldn't get a regular plumber to go look at.
Just made me think of submarines for some reason too. Like, what are they? Like, how? I mean,
submarines do desalination.
Okay.
Most modern submarines are run by a nice little nuclear generator.
Right.
And so they have essentially unlimited power at their fingertips.
Right.
And so they just desalinate water.
Did you think about that for your system, for habitat?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah?
I've got a buddy who works at one of those new startups that's focused on small modular reactors, SMRs.
Okay.
And those are basically containerized nuclear power plants.
Whoa.
They're super cool. I think it's a really interesting technology that's really coming into fashion, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Especially compared to those huge nuclear reactors that are still being built everywhere. Not so much in the U.S., but I think they're still building them in Europe to some extent. And they're really interesting because they use much lower grade uranium, and it makes it less volatile, and you basically reduce your meltdown risk to zero, because it's just not concentrated enough, but it still generates enough heat that you can extract electricity from it for a fairly long period of time on a small scale. So they're like 1 megawatt reactors built into a small shipping container.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. And you could power a small neighborhood with something like that.
Whoa.
Like our whole street.
Wow. Isn't there a car too that's like hydro? I think there's like a Toyota, or
the Toyota Mirai is a hydrogen powered car. So that's a whole different set of technology.
Another thing.
Yeah, another thing.
Right. So how many with the system that you just described for us, what type of house would be using this? Like, how big, how many people? Walk me through like how long could I sustain off of like of this?
Yeah.
Let's just say the power goes out, water goes out, everything goes out, right? How long can I, survive with this thing? Sure.
So let's say, so nominally it's designed for like a 1,500 to 2,000 square foot home, four person family, and there's several different modes of operation. There's sort of your normal mode where you've got a regular generation profile from your solar array or wherever you're drawing electricity from, and you've got somewhat regular rainwater capture and things like that. You've got a regular source of water to draw from, because there is a need for makeup in some way, shape, or form. But if you're in conservation mode, which would kick in if your electricity stops being generated or your water resources stop being replenished, then you could last up to 3 weeks on the electricity part of the system without generating anything new. And then you could last up to 3 months with just the water reserves that you have contained within the system.
Is there an amount of gallons that it holds of water, or do you know? Yeah, what is that?
1,500 gallons.
Okay.
Roughly.
So then, what's the percentage of it that gets recycled?
I believe it is close to 75 or 80%.
Wow. Cool.
And that is a function of how much you flush the toilet and how leaky your house is.
Yeah.
And that can really vary from user to user and depends on a lot of different factors that you can't really control for, but there are basic numbers that the EPA puts out that sort of summarize what the average household does.
And then as far as that's the hardware component. Now there's also some software, I mean, Habitat is more than just this system in a shipping container or this shipping container sized whatever, right? What else is involved with Habitat?
Sure. So there's some software control algorithms that go into both a predictive resource allocation for the different chassis. So you've got your water, wastewater, and electricity chassis, and the predictive algorithm will tie both your usage data with the weather data. So there's it'll tie into either local weather reports, or you can put on your own weather tower onto the system and hook that up and get real-time data that way. And so it'll use those weather reports to inform how the system should operate in conjunction with how it knows you use your resources, and meter them out accordingly. And then there's some additional optimization under the hood that goes on how to allocate essentially the electricity to run everything that needs to be run, and then cut off the sort of excess stuff. But that really only would kick in a conservation mode operation.
Got it. So then if I'm going to put one of these systems at my house, do I need to get the city's permission? I mean, do I need to get permits, or have you gotten that far in the research? Or
Yeah. You need some permits. So urban centers are a little tricky because oftentimes they do require you to be connected. It's not so easy to just island yourself, and they oftentimes have regulations that require connections to the grid. So I'm trying to avoid urban areas at the start, just because that's more complicated and requires a lot more in terms of the permitting process and really understanding how the local jurisdictions want to deal with those things. But if you go out to any kind of rural community like Joshua Tree or up north in Mendocino or to
Palmdale? I mean, could be close.
Palmdale, Lancaster area, those are similar, but a little more urban than out in Joshua Tree.
Right, true.
But there's still plenty of places out there that just don't have anything.
Right.
You go a little bit east or west of the 14 up there, and there's nothing.
Right.
It's not, in those areas, it's going to be a much easier play to install something like this, because they're working on a traditional septic system out there anyway.
Getting it going.
Stuff.
Planning. So I guess why would I want this, as a homeowner, aside from the things you've already mentioned? Like, why would I go ahead and do this? Like, what's the big sell for me? If it is, let's just say, jump ahead, right? It's in the market. Why am I putting this in my house?
So jump ahead 5 to 7 years, with some cost reductions and economies of scale, I can make this thing cheaper than your typical utilities.
Wow.
And so it's sort of a twofold sales pitch there, both in terms of this is going to save you money over time, and this is going to give you added safety and security because you have better control. The other sort of ancillary benefit here is that if people are motivated to live off grid, you have to become an expert in all these different systems. It's not just, oh, I want to go live off grid and I want to do this thing. I want to have a farm and go live on my own and homestead it or whatever. Like you have to learn water quality issues, and you have to learn about how to manage your own electricity use, and you have to figure out what to do with your septic system, and you got to get that maintained, and it takes a lot of work and knowledge. And so I'm really trying to reduce the barrier to entry for those types of scenarios and make it a much more seamless and easy prospect for people who are really interested in that type of lifestyle to say, oh, well, instead of piecing together something with a whole bunch of different solutions, here's one thing that I can buy that does all of it, and it will save me money.
It's just like got my mind going so crazy, about places around the world too, where, I don't know why this made me think of like refugee camps, but
I've thought of it.
Yeah. Right? That's what a
Totally.
Refugee camp is, right? It's just like an off-grid system with nothing in it.
Yeah.
Nations could be at least
it's not just refugee camps. There's a whole subset of the globe that just doesn't have access to any of this.
Right.
And their countries don't have the wealth to really build out a large central infrastructure backbone that we have in the U.S.,
right?
Which at this point is really old, and so it's going to need a lot of maintenance and upkeep to bring it into the 21st century. And so all those countries that just don't have that type of infrastructure to begin with are looking to build it out, but it's expensive. And it takes a lot of work. So if you can figure out a way to decentralize it and make it in a factory, then you're starting to talk about a system that can be deployed anywhere and solve a lot of problems for a huge subset of the global populace that just doesn't have that right now.
What about, have you thought about shipping this to places, or have you gone that far to think like I need factories on different continents, or I could ship it, it's no problem? Where's your mind with that?
Sure. So the system is built in a factory. It's containerized. It can fit on your standard flatbed truck or 18-wheeler, and you can ship it to the site. That's cool. That's all pretty straightforward. Or you can put it on a rail car and bring it somewhere. The interesting part, the first patent I filed is a patent around the manufacturing process that I'm using. And so what I'm really looking to do with that is enable the company to build up a factory platform that can manufacture these and then be able to replicate that factory in a lot of different regions.
Great.
So that, the first one would be here in Southern California, but once you have a factory blueprint that works, you can replicate that wherever you want.
How big do you see this company getting? Again, think ahead. I know you're the founder, so you're thinking huge, right?
Sure.
But really, where are you seeing this going? Like in terms of scale. Do you have numbers, or do you have like units, that you would like to see out there, or projections? I mean, I don't know how far along you are with that stuff.
So by 2030, I'm hoping to do roughly 1,500 units a year. And that would be around 100 million in sales, which is good, but it's not huge.
Right.
It's not Apple huge.
Right.
But this, to give you a sense of scale, the global utilities market is $6.4 trillion a year right now. That is going to balloon to over 8 trillion by the end of the decade.
Wow.
It's enormous.
That's
and
so big,
that's globally what everybody in the world
Right.
spends on utility
Right.
infrastructure and everything. That's not the whole. That's the ultimate market.
Yeah.
So yes, it could be huge.
Right.
If this becomes the Apple of utility services, then yeah, everybody has their own habitat, and they want that hooked up to their home or their apartment or whatever, wherever they live, and then
Tap into that.
Yeah, right. So yes, it could be enormous. Does it have to be successful? No.
Right.
So I'm shooting for success in whatever form that takes, but it could be huge.
So I think I just did the math. So 1,500 units a year, right? That's 125 a month. And so I guess I'm sure you've worked out the math on how long that's part of your system is. So making 125 units a month, for example, is that in one factory, or is that multiple factories, or where did you see this?
One factory.
That's in one factory? Wow, cool. Seems like a lot to me. I mean, that seems like that thing's cranking, right? Like 5 days a week.
I mean, that's
whatever.
assuming a fully automated,
right,
or close to fully automated system.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, full automation is a difficult prospect because there are certain limitations on what automated robotics can really do and handle. But you can get pretty close and still gain a lot of the upside from the manufacturing efficiency,
right,
as well as the cost reductions without doing everything using robots.
Right. How many Teslas are made a year, or like cars? It's like
they make
400.
No, they're making over 1 million a year.
Over 1 million.
Yeah, I just read
Worldwide,
an article about
like
this.
worldwide. Okay, so it's
like
over
last
1 million.
week.
Right.
Yeah, but they're way above any other
Right.
EV manufacturer right now.
Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah. I'm just putting it into perspective in terms of like a complex thing getting made, right? Because the cars are incredibly complex to make, right? And
this is less complex than a car.
Way less complex. It seems like to me, like it's not nearly as complex, but the benefits are equal, right? Greater maybe than driving an EV car, or
yeah,
right?
I would
tandem,
argue that.
Yeah, greater. I would think.
I
right?
mean, this is really tapping into your own home security and sustainability.
Right.
And a car is just your mode of transportation.
Exactly. Right.
So
yeah,
I feel like this is a more important system to be investing in, but people here love their cars, so what do I know?
Especially in California, especially in
LA.
We do love our cars here. So one of the things you and I were chatting about too, in another conversation, was the modular component. You've already kind of touched on that, where you said it could be thrown on a flatbed trailer. I love this idea too, because right now housing, that's happening with tiny homes. There's an explosion of tiny homes being manufactured, prefabricated, shipped to site, installed on site. There's shipping container housing where people are building houses in shipping containers. There's 3D printed homes, which I've seen a company in LA that's doing 3D printed homes.
Yeah, I've been there too.
What's that?
I know the CEO who runs that.
All right. Yeah. So I think it's not it's not like an unrealistic kind of trajectory and unrealistic goal to achieve, right? We're already kind of doing these types of things in housing and in energy. Who are we competing with here? What's the market look like? Are there people out there doing similar things? Like how, what's this industry look like right now?
There are people doing similar things. No one's doing the exact same thing. There's a pretty big focus on the disaster relief side of the industry, where people are providing containerized electricity generation, storage, and then water filtration services. And that certainly has a niche there, because if services go down, you need a way to prop them up quickly, and they can send these units out super fast and provide that service to the areas in need, which is great. Like that's a super pertinent and useful way to apply the technology. But that's really focused around rapid response, rapid deployment in an area of need. Which isn't to say that I couldn't build something for that particular market, but that's not really what I'm focused on. On the other side, there's some companies and organizations that are really focused on the off-grid, super sustainable living side of things. Some of them are trying to take more of the factory manufacturing approach, but they're focused on like one subset of it, like batteries or water generation or something. There's a whole movement towards atmospheric water capture right now, and there are a bunch of companies pursuing that. I'm a little iffy on that whole idea just because it's so energy intensive. It's like running an AC unit, but not for the AC, for the condensed water that it off puts.
Jeez.
At the other end.
That's
so
that's the analogy of what that industry is like.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's just you're dumping energy into that thing, and unless you've got a huge reserve, I don't really think it makes sense.
Right.
And then you've got organizations that are really focused more on the hyper sustainability component of this living style, and they are really more focusing on the lifestyle side of things, and want to educate people on how to live sustainably, and want to teach people how to build homes in this way, and using recycled materials, and building passive heating and passive cooling into the home, and having all those different types of systems that I'm trying to build in, but it's on a much more sort of sustainable level that makes it difficult to broaden your user base without doing everything in a very piecemeal, custom fashion.
That was like, we talked about that too, where it was more of an educational kind of platform, not necessarily like a product, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then in terms of, your research, we're going to start to wrap things up just a little, but I have a couple more questions. In terms of the research you've done so far, we've talked about, refugee camps. We've talked about people wanting to live off grid. Are there, I guess this is kind of in conjunction with the demand, right? When I'm a business person, I'm always like, is there demand for this, for this type of a product? Have you found that there's like regions in this country or even outside of the country where there's like communities that are active and or online even? Is there like a community of off-grid lifestyles that's like active? You're educating me too as well. I'm not. I have no clue what this lifestyle is like. Just for the extreme person, the one that's like in the beginning, we're launching this. It's going to be more for those types of people, not really in the cities.
Yeah. There's the whole sort of community, which I think is called planners.
Okay.
And they are like hyper focused on this type of off-grid living, on your own, doing everything by yourself, and really having as much control over all of your life support systems as you possibly can. So yeah, there's a whole community around that. I feel like that's kind of on the extreme end of things. And while I think that's a really interesting community, they're a little bit on the periphery, and I'm really trying to pull this idea closer to the center, closer to where I think most people kind of live and navigate, and make it appeal to that person.
Mainstream. We want to be mainstream.
Yeah.
We're not making indie films. We're making blockbusters.
Yeah.
Right.
But with utilities.
Yeah.
Which is
real.
like inherently unsexy, but it's fine.
This is real.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing with, our homes in general. It's just people, it's not a sexy industry. It's not, it's becoming popular.
Unless you really like it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also becoming popular, right? There's a lot of reality shows about real estate right now, and the whole, there's networks devoted to renovations, so I think it's like blowing up. So that's good for us, in the industry. It's good for you because there's more
more focus.
Discussion.
Yeah.
There's more discussion on homes and the way we live and how we live in them. Naomi and I focus heavily on making the space you live in as beautiful as possible to, help with your well-being, to help with, your daily life, to make it beautiful. We believe in making your space beautiful and functional as well. It's kind of where our focus is, So definitely has helped us as a whole, as a business. And I think, we'll help you along your journey as well, and we'll help, get this thing off the ground, because I think, again, like we talked about, all this movement that's happening in housing, also with people working from home, I think that will have an impact too as well. I think, in the future, if we start to migrate a little bit further away from the cities, in the future, if that stays if that becomes a trend and stays to be a trend, then yeah, I mean, more demand, right?
Absolutely. We'll see what happens with the whole return to the office fight that's going on right now. But I think people got a taste of working from home, and there's a lot of them who like it. Yeah. And I don't think it's going away. Right. So we'll see what happens there. So,
all right. I think that we can wrap this up. Why don't you tell me, if you want to leave me with a little bit more information, why don't you tell me something more about your system that we might have missed? Is there anything we missed, or how are you feeling?
I mean, not especially.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I would add is that we only have one planet to live on. We have to figure out how to live here sustainably. And everyone loves to talk about Mars and living on the moon. And before we even think about going there, we have to figure out how to live here. So that's really where I'm coming at.
Those are some good parting words. I agree. Let's put some energy and resources to life on Earth.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
we need it.
All the people who are spending their time and money trying to get off planet, we got to figure out this first.
That's right. So how can I get in touch with you? How can I learn more? Can you tell me ways that I may be able to reach you to figure out more about this?
You can email me at kai@habitatinfrastructure.com, and I'll be pushing my website online in the next few days, which is habitatinfrastructure.com.
Great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I hope you have great success, and I hope to help you in any way that I can along the way. and follow this journey along with you, and maybe even build some of these with you. I would as a builder and as a home person, home lover, and as an agent, I think I love this. I love what you're doing. I see great value here for business and for the earth. So I applaud you. I applaud you, man. This is good stuff. Thanks for joining me today.
Let's do it.
All right. I appreciate it. Have a good one. And thanks for joining me on the Crawl Space podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode.